What's up, it's Chris. I'm going to show you how to illustrate and animate a 3D turning house using only shape layers and only After Effects. Let's check it out. Okay, so over in After Effects we have a blank project. I'm going to go ahead and click New Composition. We're going to call this House, and we're going to set the height and width to 1080 and 24 frames per second. And let's make this 4 seconds long. I'm going to change the background color to black. Hit OK. To start, let's add in a background layer by double-clicking the rectangle tool. That'll create a shape layer that fills the background, the full size, and we're going to go ahead and make that kind of a light grayish purple color. We're going to call this layer background and click here to lock it so that it doesn't get in our way. Next, we're going to start blocking out the shapes of the house. So I'm going to draw out a new shape here and make this kind of a light purple color. This is going to be the front of the house. As you can see right now, it is a parametric shape, which means you can adjust the properties like this and it'll always be a rectangle. Instead, I'm going to right click here and convert it to a Bezier path. That allows me, if I hit V to get into the select mode, to double click on here and I get individual paths that I can select and manipulate. That's going to be crucial for how we're going to animate this. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of these and make it a tiny bit wider, and then I'm going to name this front. I'm going to duplicate that with Control D and drag it over so it matches the edge there. Double click to get this, Control, and bring this in. So this is going to be the side of the house. So we'll make this kind of a dark color. Hit enter to name this side, and boom, we have the sides of our house. Now I'm going to take this front layer, duplicate it, and call it front roof, or roof as some people would say. I'm going to select this layer, twirl this down, and grab the path here, and that should allow me to double click and drag this up. So now we have this roof part. We want to make this look like a triangle. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to hit G on my keyboard to get the pen tool, or I can click right up here. And I'm going to clear out my selection and click right in the middle to get a triangle by deleting these two corner points. So now we have the front there. I'm going to make that a lighter color so we can tell the difference between those. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this side. Control D to duplicate, grab the path here, double click on it to select it, and we're going to bring this up here. Now we want to align this with the top of here, and in order to do that I'm going to go View, Show Rulers, or Control R, and I'm going to drag down a guide that matches with the top of this roof point. I'm going to drag this up. I'm going to clear out that selection, select these 2 points, and drag them over until they align with the tip of the roof. So now we have a full shape for our house. I'm going to name this side roof, and then I'm going to change the color to kind of a medium purple. All right. Whoops. Now we have a house. Looks great. Let's add in some details. We're going to call this house, and we're going to grab all 4 of these layers, collapse them, right click, group shapes. We're going to call this house base. Now we're going to grab the rectangle tool again, and let's start adding in some other shapes. I'm going to add a door here, and that's kind of a tall door. So we're going to, first of all, make sure we convert this to a Bezier path, or as I generally like to say, Bezier path. We're going to make that all line up, drag this down to here. It's a nice looking door. Cool. We're going to call this door. We're going to duplicate it, Control D. We're going to drag it over here. Double click to get these tools. Sometimes the shape tool editing is really wonky in After Effects. I don't know why, but maybe they'll eventually figure that out. We're gonna make it kind of more window sized here. Call this window. Control D to duplicate, drag it over, and then let's duplicate both of those by selecting both, hitting Control D. We're gonna drag those up a little. So now we got some windows on the side. Those look a little massive. Maybe this is a really modern house, I don't know. So we're gonna select all 4 of those. We're gonna come over here to the search bar and type path. Now we're gonna grab all of these path properties. We're gonna double click, and now we can select all of these and manipulate all of them at the same time. I kind of want them to be like skinnier windows, and then select these 2 on the left. Let's drag them out a little bit, maybe more like that. And then drag all of them and make sure they're centered. Cool. So now we have a nice house. I'm gonna clear this out. I think it's a little too big for our scene. So what I'm gonna do is I want this to scale from the bottom here. So I'm going to hit Y to get the anchor point moving tool. And I'm gonna drag this down. And if you hold Control or Command, it'll snap to these different points. Super handy for centering the anchor point or grabbing it to any of these different corners. Now if I hit S to scale, I'm gonna drop this down to about yay big. Okay, let's move this up into our scene and let's start blocking out this animation. So let's go to the end of the animation. Let's just make this 2 seconds for now. I'm gonna hit N to trim my work area to this size, or you can just drag this in. And I'm going to click here, type path. We want to grab all of these path properties here. So hold Shift to select them all. We're gonna click on the stopwatch and that'll set a keyframe for all of them. That way we don't lose our beautiful house design. If I select a path and then drag over all of these and then double click, I can get a bounding box so I can adjust all of it at once. If I drag this in but then hold Control, it'll scale to the center. And I'm going to squish this in, and I'm going to grab all of these points that are on the front. I'm going to drag them way over here. I'm going to grab these side points and drag them way over here. So now if you ignore the windows, it kind of looks like it's rotating. Pretty sweet. So that's the whole principle here. Okay. So now we're getting a basic rotation. I think this is a little too dramatic of a side move there. We want this to stay centered in the frame. So I'm going to go over to the end and I'm going to draw out, 2 rulers that kind of approximate where this sits in the frame. And if we go over here to the end, we can grab all of these keyframes and move it so it stays centered there. The last thing we need to do is make these windows not look terrible. So we're going to drag these out. And you'll see from the side view here, they look a lot bigger than they did. That's why we had to squish them in. How about that? That almost looks 3D. Beautiful. So I'm going to go up here, View, Show Guides, and View, Show Rulers to get rid of those things. And we're going to start to add in extra layers to make this look even better. That's the basic effect here, but a lot of the effect can come from adding additional elements. So if we add some stuff in the foreground and the background, we can start to make this illusion even stronger. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw out a little bush shape here. It's like a little bubbly bush. Pretty sweet. I'm going to make this darker like that. All right. Now we hit Y, we can grab this anchor point, Control, drag it down to the center of there. That way if we need to adjust the scale, it's kind of a giant bush right now. We can do that. Call this bush. And then if we hit P and position, we can right click and separate dimensions. And that way we get this own property for the Y position. So now this is how we're going to make this look like it's attached. If we hit U, we can see, let's drag these keyframes over so they're right at 2 seconds. And then let's hit P, go to the X position, hit a keyframe, and then scroll to the end here. And let's just drag this so it looks like it's next to the door. So it looks like it's moving with that. So it looks a little bit weird. I think this needs to be dragged over a little further. So now it looks like it's a little bit in front of the door. If we make that even more extreme, yeah, that looks nice. Let's drag it back a little bit. So now we're getting this cool bush in front of the house look. Let's go ahead and duplicate this by hitting Control D to get a second bush. We're going to grab the X position. If you hit V to select, you can grab one of the points here that shows the animation and drag it over, and let's do a bush over on this side. This one I think is going to be a little further away, but a little closer to the camera, so it needs to be a tiny bit bigger. And that means it will move further because it's closer to the camera. So let's drag this point over. That's starting to look kind of cool. If we hit P, we can adjust the Y position, drag it up a little bit. So we're starting to get this 3D illusion. How about that? I don't really like how wide these windows are here. So I'm going to go in and select all of those, the paths for all of those, which are here. I'm going to double click again, select all the windows. I'm just going to hold Control, drag these in a tad bit. Yeah, that feels a lot more balanced. Perfecto. Okay, so now we got some bushes in the front. What's the next thing we can add? Let's get some trees in there. I'm gonna draw out some simple trees, make a new shape layer, draw a point there and a point here, and then close that. We make this point fat at the bottom, skinny on the top, kind of looks like a tree a little bit. Then we're going to grab the pen tool here and draw a stem for the tree. If we fill that color, something a little lighter, like that, now we got a nice tree. Let's get that anchor point, for the whole layer. We hit Y, drag it down to the bottom, and then we can scale this tree. Let's make that tree 1. I'm going to close all those down and then drag it to the bottom of the stack. So now it's behind the house. Let's add a couple more trees, Control D to duplicate. And if we double click on these different layers, we can then scale this down, maybe adjust the point so it doesn't look exactly the same. Maybe make this one a little lopsided or a little skinnier, maybe a little fatter because it's shorter. And then let's select both of those, Control D to duplicate. We're going to drag them over to this side of the house. And I'm going to make this one, the biggest tree. And then drag this one over here. So now we can kind of lay out a nice balanced composition. Those trees kind of frame the house a little bit. We're going to grab all 4 of the trees, hit P, grab all of the position properties, right click, separate dimensions, grab all of the X position properties, and click the stopwatch to set a keyframe. And we'll go to the end of this, and these trees need to move the opposite direction of the bushes. And that's where we're going to get our big depth perception here. So if we grab this, drag the position over, we're just going to rough this out. We're going to slide all of these over more and see how that starts to look. Yeah, we're starting to get this cool depth. Okay, Now I want this to end up looking a little better because this is kind of the ending frame. So I'm going to drag this in and maybe drag this one in a little closer. We'll drag this over. Drag this over. I feel like these need to both be in closer. So now they kind of lose that depth, but what we can do is we can then have these start a little more spread out. By dragging these in. Remember, we're updating these keyframes for all of this, so it kind of helps us balance this out. Now, we're starting to even get some depth because these trees are moving at different speeds. I want to have this tree maybe move faster. No, that doesn't actually work. Maybe this one moves faster and this one moves a little slower. Yeah, because that big tree is in the background there. Beautiful. Okay. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do to add some extra dimension to this is we're going to go to the end of this frame and we're going to draw a path going up to the doorway. So this path is going to start at the door. It's going to kind of curve out and then it's going to come over here and it's going to curve back in and end at the doorway. And we're going to close this off. If we want to make this so it's easier to see, we can right click on here and change the color of the layer to yellow, and it'll make all of our path layers yellow. It makes it a lot easier to see a contrasting color here. I'm going to make this a little more swoopy, a little swoopy like that. That's feeling pretty nice. Maybe I'll add another point in here to give it some extra room. That's a pretty nice path. Okay, so now we're going to click on this layer, hit enter to name it, call it path, and then we're going to search for path. And we're going to find this path. Inside this path, we're going to click on that, and we're going to set a keyframe. Now if we go to the beginning, we need to draw out how this path looks from the side view. So I'm going to drag these points over. This is the easiest part to start. Drag this over, and we know this needs to start at the door. Now how does this gonna move? Well, we know that it's kind of comes out straight from the house and then curves to the right. So we know this needs to come much further out this way. And we can drag all of these layers out. Ooh, and actually something like that would look really cool. So let's drag this up. And let's make this a little less of a dramatic curve there. Now, if we look at that, it's starting to look pretty cool. Oh yeah, baby. If we want to make this a little bit more extreme, let's go ahead and drag all of these points over a little bit more. Especially this one. So that we can create a little bit more motion at the bottom of the frame, and that'll add a lot more depth to our image. I want to make sure this looks good when there's no layers, so I'm going to hide everything, Control-Shift-H. See how that looks. That looks pretty nice. Now, we have a pretty sweet looking 3D animation with only these layers. If you set enough path keyframes, you can make everything look good. That's my motto. That's a bad motto. Don't do that. But you know what I mean. Let's twiddle that around. Okay, the last thing we need to do is this bush gets too close to the path. So I'm going to hit U to twirl down those keyframes. I'm going to make sure I'm selected over this one. I'm just going to drag this over a tiny bit. And I'm going to go to the beginning, make it a little bit less wonkadoodle. Cool. I see a little bit of gap underneath here. So I think all of our trees need to move up a bit. You can see them peeking below the house. So hit P. You can drag all their Y position up. And that'll actually kind of help with the dimension there. Nice. Looking good. All right. The last thing we need to do to top off this beautiful image, so let's create some smoke. So we're going to create a new composition, call it smoke. We're going to go over to the pen tool. We're going to draw out a little triangle shape. It goes kind of like this. And you might be saying, that's not what smoke looks like. But just you wait. It will be. We're going to name this layer smoke. Click here to change this fill to a linear gradient. Hit V to select the gradient tools. And we're going to drag the white side down and the black side up to the top. Now if we click here, we can change our gradient. Okay, so make sure that your gradient is going from white to white and from 100% opacity to 0% opacity. That way we get this nice fall off here. If we toggle transparency, you can see what that looks like. Now we're going to go to Effect Controls, right click, go to Distort, and all the way down at the bottom, Wave Warp. Wave Warp is dope. Okay, we're going to set the direction first of all to 0 so that it goes vertically here. Then we're going to pin this to the bottom edge. So now you can see it kind of fades up like that. All we have to do is adjust the height and the width of this effect. And we have a really easy, simple, cool smoke animation. I want this to be a little slower, so I'm going to put this at 0.5. And I'm going to change the anti-aliasing. You can see it gets a little bit blocky there. So I'm going to change that to medium. Now if we go back into our main comp, we can drag the smoke layer down below the house. We can bring it over, scale it down. Let's put it back, the back of the house here. Let's make it like that big. So now I'm going to hit P, separate dimensions again. Let's make sure we're at the beginning of the composition. Set a keyframe on the X position. Go to the end. And set a keyframe at the end. So now that follows the house. We have a sweet 3D animation. If we want to make this match the rest of the scene, we can right click and go to Generate Fill and then color pick maybe that color. And it'll fill our layer, keep the transparency there. And it's beautiful. Now here's what you can do. If you don't like this purple, this is my kind of hacky way of changing colors. We'll just create a new adjustment layer, then right click, color correction, hue saturation. Then you can drag this hue and you can play with it. You can make it a little more pinkish, make it a little more saturated, a little less saturated. But I kind of like the colors we have. So then all you have to do is render it out and you have this cool effect. Now if you want this to not just linearly turn like this, you can hit U to show all of your keyframes. I'm going to drag this up. Make sure you select all of them. And then you can right click, change this to Easy Ease, maybe change all of these to Easy Ease as well. And you kind of have this smooth in and out animation. Or if you want it to start fast and then go smoothly at the end, you can select all of your keyframes. Click here to go to the graph editor. Make sure you're looking at the speed graph. Grab all of those and pull this in nice and tight. Then you can select all of the ending ones and pull this over. So now as you can see, based on this graph, the speed is going to start really fast and it's going to end up really slow. It's just going to kind of zoop in there. Look at that. Pretty sweet. So I actually really like to do that kind of thing to get into scenes. It adds some nice motion that you can cut on and can add a lot of life to an otherwise pretty static, simple scene. So this was a really simple application of how you can set path keyframes to make something look 3D even though it's not. If you're creative with this, you can really take it to extremes. You can make things rotate fully 360 degrees. You can do it on faces to make them look like they're turning. It's really a powerful technique of just setting manual keyframes, making sure things are moving how they would in the real life. Hopefully you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, check me out on Twitter and Instagram at It's The Only Chris. Subscribe on YouTube if you want to. Comment below if you like this, and I'll see you next time. Peace. Hey, if you're still here, I really appreciate you checking this video out. I'm trying to get better at these. I'm trying to do more tutorials and share more of the things that I wish I knew when I was getting started in animation or motion design. If there's anything you really would like to learn, or tutorials that you feel like other people aren't covering well, different things you're interested in, let me know. I'd really love to find out. I want to help. I'd love your feedback on the forum and content. Do you want more short stuff? Do you want long stuff? Do you want advanced stuff? Let me know. If you have any sort of feedback, hit me up, send me an email, or even better, hit me up on Twitter at It's The Only Chris. I'll see you next time. Peace.